Okay, let's unpack this. And I want to start with a confession, a bit of a safe space moment for all the IT pros listening.
Uh-oh.
When I first heard the phrase identity in the cloud, my brain immediately went into what I call lazy admin mode.
I think I know where this is going.
I thought, okay, brilliant. I'll just pick my existing domain controller, that noisy server sitting in the rack, copy paste it onto the internet, and boom, I'm cloud native. Job done.
It is a very comforting thought. It's also the fastest way to get hacked, fail an audit, and probably lose your job.
That is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today.
Mm-hmm.
We are unpacking Microsoft Entra ID. And we aren't just talking about, changing where we save passwords.
No, not at all.
We're talking about the fundamental backbone of how modern organizations exist. We're moving away from the old school Active Directory we all grew up with and stepping into something completely different.
Different is putting it mildly. The source material for this dive, this technical module, it makes a very specific distinction right out of the gate that changes the entire conversation. Entra ID is not infrastructure.
Meaning it's not a server I can remote desktop into.
Exactly. It's a paid-as offering platform as a service. It is a managed directory service. You don't patch the OS. You don't worry about hard drive failures.
You don't worry about replication.
None of it.
Yeah.
It lives in the cloud. It scales automatically, and it's designed to secure applications, whether they're in your office, on a phone, in a coffee shop, or running in a container halfway around the world.
Okay, platform as a service. That sounds great for the budget meetings, but before we get too futuristic, I think we need to ground this.
For sure.
Because a lot of our listeners, and frankly me included, have spent years, maybe decades, bowing at the altar of ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services.
The old world.
The old world. World of freezing cold server rooms. If we don't understand what we're leaving behind, we won't appreciate where we're going.
Yeah.
So walk me through the anatomy of that old world.
Sure. So if you've worked in IT since the year 2000, ADDS is your bread and butter. It's physical. It runs on Windows Server. You have domain controllers, actual machines that you have to care for.
Right.
And the language they speak is incredibly chatty. They use protocols like Kerberos for authentication.
And LD8 to query data?
Yep. And LDFP.
I still have nightmares about configuring LDFP strings. The syntax is just brutal.
We all do. But think about the shape of ADDS. It's a tree. It's hierarchical. You have forests, then domains, and then the organizational unit, the OU.
It's built like a filing cabinet.
That's a great way to put it. You put the marketing team in this folder, sales in that folder. And how do you manage them?
Group policy, GPOs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the superpower of the old world. You push a button and 10,000 computers change their wallpaper or disable their USB ports. It is distinct command and control.
Okay, so that's our baseline. Domain controllers, Kerberos, OUS GPOs. Now let's look at the source material for Entra ID. Because reading this, I got the impression that if I try to apply my old world logic here, I'm going to hit a wall.
You will. The architecture is fundamentally different because the goal is different. ADDS was built for a LAN, a local area network.
High bandwidth, trusted wires.
Right. Entra ID is built for the internet.
So it can't use Kerberos.
It can't, no. Kerberos just doesn't like the internet. It's too
chatty. Right.
way too chatty. It needs line of sight to a controller, and firewalls absolutely hate it. Entra ID communicates over HTTP and HTTPS ports 80 and 443.
The same ports you use to browse the web.
Precisely, which means it works anywhere the internet works. And instead of Kerberos, it uses modern web protocols. SAML, WS Federation, OpenID Connect.
And oath.
And and if you want to query the directory, no, LDIP, you use a REST API, the Microsoft Graph API. It's a completely different language.
So there's one detail in the reading that really stood out. You said ADDS is a tree, but the source says Entra ID is flat.
Yes. And this is usually the hardest adjustment for traditional admins to wrap their heads around. In Entra ID, there are no forests. There are no organizational units.
Oh.
You cannot create that deep nested structure. It is effectively one giant flat list of users and groups.
Wait, pause there. If I don't have OUs, what happens to my group policies? If I can't target the London marketing OU with a GPO, What do I do?
You don't do it in the directory. That's the major conceptual shift. In Entra ID, the directory handles identity. It proves who you are.
Okay.
It does not manage the configuration of your laptop. The source material is very clear. Entra ID does not do GPOs.
That feels like a divorce. The directory and management used to be married.
That's a great way to put it. For the management side, you have to shift your mindset to modern management. Using tools like Microsoft Intune, you create dynamic groups in Entra, and then Intune targets that group with policies. But the directory itself,
It just holds the list.
it just holds the list.
That is going to take some getting used to. And there's another separation, computer objects. In AD, a computer is a first-class citizen. It joins the domain.
Right. In Entra ID, we talk about devices, but the relationship is different. And you can't just spin up a virtual machine in Azure, install the Active Directory role, and call it Entra ID.
The source had a big warning label on that. Do not do this.
Huge warning. If you put a domain controller on an Azure VM, you are just extending your on-prem network into the cloud. That's infrastructure as a service. That is not Entra ID. They are totally different beasts.
Okay, you dropped the T word. Tenant. It's on almost every page of the documentation. It sounds like I'm renting a cheap apartment. What does it actually mean?
Well, it's actually a pretty good analogy. Think of Entra ID as a massive skyscraper. The building itself, the electricity, the plumbing, the security, that's all managed by Microsoft.
Okay, so Microsoft is the landlord.
Right. A tenant is your specific apartment in that building. It represents your organization. And even though you're in the same building as a million other companies, your door is locked. Your data is isolated.
So my user data isn't mingling with my competitors.
Absolutely not. That logical separation is core to the architecture. When you create a tenant, you get a unique identifier. Usually, it looks like your company.onmicrosoft.com.
I've seen those. And usually people swap that out for their actual .com address immediately.
They do, and they should, but that .onmicrosoft.com address is always there in the background. Now, here's where it connects to the money, the Azure subscription.
Right, because someone has to pay for the VMs. How do those two connect?
An Azure subscription must be associated with one and only one Entra tenant. It trusts that tenant to say, yes, this user is allowed to spin up this server.
So one subscription, one tenant.
Well, one subscription trusts one tenant, but a single tenant can support multiple subscriptions.
Oh.
So you can have your production subscription and your dev subscription both pointing back to the same corporate identity tenant.
Got it. The tenant is the source of truth.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of sources of truth, I want to tackle what I think was the most brain-bending concept in the source material: applications. Specifically, the distinction between an application object and a service principal.
Ah, yes. The service principal. This trips up almost everyone.
It sounds like a high school administrator. I am the service principal.
It does, but let's simplify it. Let's use an analogy. Imagine you're building a fast food franchise.
Yeah.
You write the operations manual. It defines the menu, the uniform, the logo. That manual, that's the application object. It's the blueprint.
Okay, so that's the definition, the abstract idea.
Right. Now, you want to open a location in New York and another in London, the actual physical store in New York. That is the service principal.
I think I see where you're going. The service principal is the local representation of the app.
Exactly. In the context of Entra ID, you build an app, you want to sell it to company A and company B, you define the application object once. But when company A installs it, a service principal is created in company A's tenant.
And that service principal is what holds the permissions for company A.
Yes. The service principal in company A is what says, this app is allowed to read email in this tenant. It allows the app to function locally without you having to rebuild it for every customer.
That actually makes a ton of sense. It's a way to handle software in a SaaS world. Define once, initiate everywhere.
Precisely.
Okay, moving on. We've got the architecture, we've got the tenants. Now let's talk about what you actually get. Because there's a free version, and then there's the stuff you pay for. Free, P1, and P2.
Right. The free tier is surprisingly robust. If you have an Azure subscription or Office 365, you already have Entra ID free, but you're right, the real heavy lifting, the enterprise security stuff happens in the premium tiers.
Let's start with Premium P1. What's the killer feature there?
For most orgs, P1 is about two things: hybrid capability and conditional access. P1 gives you the license for MIM Microsoft Identity Manager, and it also gives you self-service password reset with write back.
Write back. Why does that one word matter so much?
It matters because of user friction. Without write-back, if I change my cloud password at home, my on-prem Active Directory doesn't know. So when I go into the office and try to log into my desktop,
Your new password fails.
it fails. Write-back pushes that change back down to the on-prem server. It keeps everything in sync.
Sounds like it saves a lot of help desk calls. But you mentioned conditional access. I feel like that's the buzzword I hear constantly.
It is the cornerstone of modern security. In the old days, security was binary. Do you have the password? Yes. Okay, come in.
Who's
Simple. It's dumb security. Conditional access introduces context. It says, okay, you have the password, but where are you? Are you on a managed device? Is that device healthy?
So I can set a rule that says, if you're in the finance group and you're accessing payroll, you must be on a corporate laptop.
Exactly. Or if you are logging in from a coffee shop, you need to do a multi-factor authentication check. It moves us from static to dynamic security.
That seems like a must-have. So what is left for Premium P2? If P1 does all that, what does P2 do?
P2 is when you want to get proactive. It introduces identity protection and privileged identity management, or PM.
Okay, break those down. Identity protection sounds like it's doing detective work for me.
It is. It uses machine learning to analyze billions of signals. It looks for impossible travel. Did this user just log in from London and then 5 minutes later from Tokyo?
Which, unless they have a teleporter, is impossible.
Right. P2 flags that risk instantly, and it can automatically trigger a response like forcing a password reset before a human admin even wakes up.
That leads us to PM, Privileged Identity Management. This addresses a pet peeve of mine, the God Mode admin account.
The standing admin, the account that has full power, 247,365. It's a massive security risk. If that account gets compromised at 3 a.m. on a Sunday, the attacker owns your kingdom.
So how does PM fix that?
It changes the philosophy to just-in-time access. With PM, you aren't an admin. You are a regular user who is eligible to become an admin.
Oh, I like that distinction, eligible.
So when you need to fix a server, you go to the PM portal, you request access. You might have to type in a justification or a ticket number. Then the system grants you admin rights for, say, 2 hours.
And when the 2 hours are up?
You turn back into a pumpkin. The rights are stripped away automatically. It minimizes the attack surface. You're only a super user when you actually need to be.
That is smart. It turns administration into a workflow.
Precisely.
Now, I want to pivot to a specific scenario from the source material. It feels like the elephant in the room. We've spent all this time talking about how great the cloud is, modern protocols.
I sense a but coming.
A big but. I'm a company moving to the cloud. I love all this Entra stuff. However, I have this one ancient application. Maybe it's a legacy SQL server, and it's stubborn. It demands Kerberos. It needs to see a domain controller, or it won't launch.
This is the classic lift and shift nightmare. You want to move the workload to Azure, but rewriting the app is just too expensive or impossible.
So what used to be the solution?
The hard way. You'd build a site-to-site VPN back to your office so the app in the cloud could talk to the DC in your basement.
Which is fragile.
Very. Or you'd build replica domain controllers on VMs in the cloud, which means now you're managing servers again, patching Windows, backing up AD, the whole thing you tried to escape.
Right.
Enter the solution. Microsoft Entra Domain Services.
Okay, we have to be careful with the naming here. It sounds exactly like Entra ID.
It does, and it's confusing. But Entra Domain Services is a specific tool for this specific problem. It is a managed service that pretends to be a traditional Active Directory.
Pretends how?
It projects a subset of your cloud users into a managed environment that speaks the old world languages. It speaks Kerberos, it speaks LDAP, it has group policy.
So my legacy app looks at it and says, oh, look, a domain controller, and just starts working.
Exactly. But, and this is a big distinction, you do not manage the servers. Microsoft handles the patching, the backups. You just consume it as a service.
That sounds like a silver bullet. Why wouldn't I just use that for everything?
You would think so, but the source material lists some significant gotchas. Remember how we said traditional AD is hierarchical?
Right. Deep nesting of OUs.
Well, Entra Domain Services is surprisingly flat. You get a single OU structure for your computers. You can't create those complex nested OUs.
So if my org structure is a mess of folders, this won't work well.
It'll be a struggle. Also, you can't extend the schema. If your app relies on some custom attribute you hacked into AD 15 years ago, it won't be there. And you don't have domain admin or enterprise admin rights.
Because Microsoft has those rights.
Exactly. So it's not a full replacement. It's a compatibility layer. It's designed to let you lift and shift those specific legacy apps without all the baggage.
So don't try to force a square peg into a round hole. Use Entra ID for the modern stuff and domain services only when you have to bridge that gap.
That is the best practice.
So let's wrap this up. We've gone from the hierarchical Kerberos-speaking world of on-prem AD to the flat HTTP-based multi-tenant world of Entra ID.
It really is a journey of evolution. We aren't just changing where the server lives, we're changing the definition of identity itself.
What's the one big takeaway you want the listener to leave with?
I think the key is to stop thinking in terms of replacement and start thinking in terms of capability. Entra ID isn't just AD in the cloud, it's a security perimeter. ADDF was about managing computers. Entra ID is about securing access. And in the real world, you rarely choose just one.
You use them together.
Use them together in a hybrid model. That is the best of breed solution. It's not an either, it's a yes and.
I want to leave everyone with a thought. We talked about how Entra ID uses identity as the security boundary. In the old days, we had firewalls. If you were in the building, you were trusted.
The castle and moat strategy.
Right. But with Entra ID, there is no moat. The user is the perimeter.
And that is the provocative thought for the day. In a world where there are no physical firewalls around your users, where they're working from anywhere, identity becomes the only security boundary that matters. So, if identity is the new firewall, how does that change how we design every other single part of our IT infrastructure? We used to secure the network to save the data. Now we have to secure the user to save the data. It flips the entire security model on its head.
Definitely something to think about next time you reach for your phone to approve an MFA request. Thanks for diving in with us.
Thank you.